All right. There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Sentient Cloud. So, it's been a couple days. Had some things going on that prevented me from streaming. I won't get into it. But I'm back, and I kind of wanted to go a slightly different direction here. I've been working a lot on writing a language parser and kind of come to the conclusion that I won't say that it's a waste of time, but I learned some stuff that have made C++ a more attractive option for writing this, as well as using basically just Lua for the scripting part. Um, and that's theoretically the case. For one, I already know how to use C++, and if I can ensure that the module system, because they introduced that in version 20 and they kind of modified it in version 23, if those work and they work consistently and they don't screw with things, then I might end up just using those, because the main problems that I had using C++, one was having to use header files. That was annoying. I'm not particularly fond of header files. And the other was there were some, well, that's really the main problem. I mean, the other is having to write down types all the time, but that's not a huge deal. I'm not really all that concerned about that. The main thing was the header files. I don't like header files. I'd rather just have one file for every kind of section of the code. So anyway, this stream is basically just going to be me kind of testing out and seeing if those work, if they work with external libraries. Like I said, I plan to use Lua, and I'm going to be using something called LuaJIT, which is the Lua just-in-time compiler. It's a very fast tool for using Lua. And I also want to see if things like OpenGL works. Does the GLAD loader work, for example? Or does GLFW or the specific windowing APIs for each platform, do they all work with modules? If they do, then that's probably where I'm going to take this. Just because I'm kind of getting off track writing my own programming language. Like, it's a neat idea, but it ends up taking a lot of time and effort. And it's not really what I want to be doing, at least not right now. It also means that I had to kind of ignore stuff like Tree Sitter for the time being, and I do want to make sure to include that. So either way, that's okay. Yeah, it is. Never mind. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm going with this. So I'm just going to get started here doing some testing and seeing what all works. So I guess the first thing I need to figure out how to use the LuaJIT. Okay, so let's open a file manager, see if I can figure out what the how to use that. So one sec here. So here we go, LuaJIT. Okay, so let's see what I need to include. Necessary Lua headers. Okay, hang on. That's to build it. Okay. Guess this is what, okay, so extensions to the standard. Okay, so I just need to do. Okay, so I need to include lua.hpp and lua.h, it looks like. Maybe some other stuff. Hi. Yeah, I can see you. Sorry, I was looking at documentation on the same browser, so I didn't see you there for a minute. Um, yeah. Don't know why they would shadow ban somebody saying hi, but anyway, all right. Let's see. Maybe this will make things a little easier. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, I don't know. So I've seen it on occasion on my own channel. It'll say, for example, the number of comments is X, and then the number of comments that I can actually see is X minus one, or minus two, or whatever. So I'm assuming that one part is just counting the raw number of comments, and then it only displays the ones that haven't been removed. Which I wish I could actually inspect those comments, but I haven't figured out how to do that myself. I'm going to operate under the assumption that they were probably like spamming, I guess you would call them ads or whatever, like whatever nonsense. But I don't know, so I'd have to take a look at that and see if I can find a way to recover them. But anyway, okay, where on earth? All right, I'm going to ignore this for now. I was going to see if I could figure out how to get how to run LuaJIT just to see and test that it works. For now, I'll ignore that. I'll focus on using other stuff. I guess we'll go ahead and I'll make actually a different file here. So let's say, let's call it renderer.cppm. One thing that is kind of annoying about C++ modules is the naming scheme has not been decided on, like across major compilers. So for example, Clang prefers the .cppm extension, and I don't think it actually works without it. Might be might be wrong, but I think that's how it works. And then Microsoft likes using the .i extension, .ipp, I think, or II, I think, is one of the other valid options. And then GCC just doesn't seem to care. So I wish they would be a bit more consistent overall, but that's, it's kind of how things seem to work. far as that goes. Let me actually go check how I did this with Logger. I'm still trying to get used to modules in general. Render.cpm. There we go. Okay, now let's say export module renderer. And actually, I need to go up above because if you don't have the header files compiled into a module itself, then you have to import them above, which isn't a huge issue, but it is something I got to be aware of. So I think it's glfw glfw.h. That's correct. I should probably import the standard IO just to make sure that I've got it. Okay. So let's do this. I don't think I need a message. Let's get rid of that. Okay. So if glfw init, there. And I think it returns 0 if it doesn't work, so we'll do this. Oh, that's annoying. Interesting. Okay, let's fix that right now. At one point, I was looking at using a language called Nim, which is basically a it converts itself, like the compiler, I guess, converts to C, and then it compiles that. So in a way, it's sort of like a really advanced C preprocessor, but there's other stuff. But it uses indentation for scoping, right? Sort of like Python does. And also GDScript for that matter. But the main issue I have is that it requires that you use spaces for its indentation. And that is something that annoys me to no end. I don't understand why that became popular, but my goodness, is it annoying. Okay, I'm going to close that for now. Okay. Now let's go back to here and start here. I'm just going to try to initialize it and then see if this works. And then let's make sure we return so we don't accidentally call glfw terminate. Oh, there. Okay, so we're just going to test to see if it works. That's fine. Okay, let's go to main. And we'll import renderer. Oh, and actually, I think I exported that. I'll have to check here in a minute. But it's a glfw test. Let's call that. And yeah, I want to check renderer, make sure that I am exporting that. Yep, so export namespace, yada. Cool, awesome. All right. I think I can just hit, oh, actually, no, I need to go to the make file first. Otherwise, this is not going to work. All right, and here, I'm just going to go ahead and do, I think it's just glfw3, I think it's the correct one. And let's just make sure that all the rest of this is correct. I need to replace these here. I tested this with Clang at first, and then I found out how to get it to work with GCC, and I figured I'd probably just use GCC because it's my preferred compiler, but okay. Missing anything? I don't think I need to link the libraries until the final compile, so that's fine. I should change this. Originally, I called them mods because I was compiling using the .pcm files that, oops, that Clang produces, because that's kind of how they do things. But since it's now just producing object files sort of the same way as it normally would, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm calling them objects, so it makes more sense in that case. Okay, let's see if this runs. Such file or directory. Okay, hold on. Let's make sure. Oh, oops. Hold on. There. Okay. Is that a thing? Yeah, it's there. Okay. No such file or directory. Why is that not including? Because it says it does exist, so. Oh, no, never mind. Got that wrong. Hold on. Let's fix that, and also gonna check the library directory just to make sure that I'm not linking the wrong thing. Let's see. Where is it? Yeah. libglfw. Yes, okay. All right, cool. So those are there. I should probably figure out how to link the proper version so I'm not accidentally linking something that's not current. But actually, I guess it doesn't really matter. Yeah, it's probably best to specify. Okay, let's go to the renderer real quick because I need to change this to glfw3. And go to the make file real quick because I specified this incorrectly. It's just the libglfw, and we'll do that just to make sure, because I think glfw does require GL, at least for some of the initialization stuff. So let's make sure we got that. Okay, so it seems to work. The only way to really tell would be to open a window with it. So let me go ahead and modify this, and let's go ahead and make a window. Let's see. I think it's that. That needs a name. Width and that, and then just call it null there. Okay. I think there's some other stuff as well that I need to include. I haven't used GLFW in a long time, and I might not end up using it in the future, but it's certainly sufficient to do the job here. So I might end up using it. Okay, so glfw init, that's running. Okay, I don't need to do a context for this. If and then not glfw window, close window. I don't need to clear anything. Let's go to glfw poll events. I think I don't need to worry about anything else, really. Okay, and then it'll just terminate, and that will be the end of things there. Okay. All right, I am going to... should probably add another screen capture for the... Oh, sure. So originally I was going to write a text editor, and I was going to kind of build my own programming language and have it compile to C. That was largely because I originally was using C++, and I was tired of having to write both a header file and a source file for every kind of part of the program, every kind of segment. And so I was tired of that, so I wanted to do something that would basically be C, but with only a single file per like logical translation unit, I think is the term, and would also have like a decent compile time semantics. So like in C, you can't have templates. They just don't work. You can get close, but you can't quite get it to work properly. But I recently discovered that modules are a thing in C++. So they added those to the language standard, and they're being implemented somewhat slowly because apparently it's much more complicated, but they are being implemented, and apparently they work. And so I'm kind of taking this stream today to kind of test that out, make sure that things work with like OpenGL and GLFW. And then from there, if they do work properly, then I will probably end up using C++ because it's a language I'm familiar with. Yeah, there are a number of languages that have been like primarily created by just a single person. And to be fair, I'm kind of offloading a lot of the trouble of making my own language, because there are a couple of different ways to go about it. If you're making a language that can be compiled, then you have to consider the issue of are you compiling it for every platform? Because different platforms have different machine code that they compile to. So, if you're writing a compiled language, you have to be able to compile to x86, which is what Intel and AMD use. You have to be able to compile to ARM, which that's kind of like the stuff that macOS uses. And there's all sorts of different individual standards that are apart from that, and even within that, like, are you using 32-bit or 64-bit? Because those do still exist. And so I kind of push that problem off to the side by wanting it to transpile into C. So converting my code to C code and then compiling that C code, because that could be done without really any major issues there. Right, like C code already compiles to basically every platform that's worth a dang. So I just decided to go that route. Even still, that's a very complicated thing to do. Building a language is pretty time consuming, especially for one person, and especially if you're trying to build all the tooling around that language as well. Because, like, for example, nowadays people need tree sitter parsers for it to be highlighted in their editors, and there's LSPs, which help to debug code without having to run the compiler every single time. And so I kind of came to the conclusion that if I can make C++ work and kind of fix the issues that I personally had with it, then it would probably be better to just use C++ and use Lua for the scripting, because everybody knows how Lua works and it's fast. So that I kind of came to the conclusion that I was trying to solve a problem that didn't necessarily exist. And so that's kind of, I'm just confirming right now whether I can use this and have it do what I want it to do. And then from there, I'll just go and start actually writing the editor, which is what I originally wanted to do. So hope that answers your queries. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's see if I can run this. And I'm going to go ahead and add in a video source here real quick. Let's call it program window here. Just go ahead and just get rid of that. That's fine. and we'll figure that out later. So like I said, I'm not actually going to be working on that for if this all works out. I'm not going to be writing my own language for the foreseeable future, just because if I don't have to, it wasn't really what I set out to do. What I set out to do was to write a text editor, and so that's kind of what I've been wanting to do. But I wanted to have a language that I could write it in, and I couldn't really find one that really satisfied my interest. Right. So, like, for example, I looked at using Rust. I don't hate Rust, but there's some issues with it. I don't really like using certain parts of it. It's much too restrictive for my taste. I prefer a lot of how C does things, just to an extent. There's a lot of caveats there. And so I wasn't really satisfied with Rust. I looked at Zig. Was not satisfied with that for a couple of reasons. For one, I despise the fact that it doesn't have a warning system in it. Zig only has errors. And so, like, for example, if you were to write a piece of code that has... Okay, I'll need to fix that here. If I were to write a piece of code that has an unused variable in it, C, if you turn, first off, actually, I don't know if it even operates, if it even cares unless you turn on warnings in C. Because in C, you can do a lot of things without the compiler even saying anything, which is not great, but that's a separate issue. Anyway, so in C, it's typically a warning. You can upgrade warnings to errors, and a lot of people will do that if they're releasing code, just to make sure that all the warnings are dealt with in one way or another. In Rust, unused variables are a warning, though you can suppress them. And so, it's not really an issue there. In Zig, the way that you suppress them, and this pisses me off to no end because it's possibly the most ridiculous design decision as far as I'm concerned. So I'm just going to go down here and throw in a comment just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So basically, in Zig, let's say we've got a variable, var x, we'll say it's equal to 0, and then I don't use that. If I do not use that, it's going to spit out an error, and it's not going to compile. And unused variables are they're largely meaningless, right? If a compiler can detect that they exist, then it can get rid of them and not worry about them. And so it's not the kind of thing that I would say qualifies as an error, right? Now, the way that you suppress this error message in Zig is you do this. Something like this, right? It just strips out that variable and says, okay, you don't need to worry about that. So basically, they've rejected the notion of a warning system in favor of having the developer put in a worthless chunk of code. And there'll be people who will say, oh, well, you can just have the like an LSP insert this stuff automatically, and then when you want to compile things for release mode, it can strip things out. Well, at that point, it's so incredibly meaningless to say that it's an error to have unused variables and then just inject a piece of worthless code. So Zig just kind of pissed me off, and so I decided I don't want to use that. I used C++ for a while, but again, the header file thing was annoying. But if the module system works, and it seems to be working fine, then I'm probably just going to use C++. We'll probably be using Lua because most people know how to write scripts in Lua, and it's fast, like lightning fast. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So all major reasons why I was going to be writing my own custom programming language kind of fell out, and it's certainly not a simple endeavor to do. So I was like, okay, do I want to spend my time writing up my own programming language, or do I want to do what I initially set out to do, which was to write a text editor? And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. If I can just write the text editor like I wanted, then that's what I'm going to do. So that is quite a long-winded explanation. Okay, invalid to... Oh, I think I screwed up the order there. That's what happened. Okay. Let's go here. So I think it's 800 there. Oop. And I don't think actually that these numbers here really matter all that much, just because of the way that I'm working. Okay, hold on. Where's... Okay, so it's not showing up. I might need to actually have it... Let's see, can I use swap buffers? I'll answer your question in just a second here. I want to make sure that I'm screwing this up. Maybe that's why it's... Okay, never mind. I'll have to figure out why it's doing that here. Okay, let's see. Why not something like Python? Okay, so the main reason is, one, again, I'm not personally very familiar with Python. Like, I know the basics of it. I could throw something very simple together, but it's not a language that I'm very familiar with. But I know a fair bit more about Lua. I've used it for for working in NeoVim, because NeoVim has Lua as its main scripting language. I've used it actually when I was gosh, what's it called? At one time, I wanted to write a mod for a game called Supreme Commander, if you've ever heard of it. If you haven't, look it up. It's a pretty cool game. It's an old strategy game made by, I think it's Gas Powered Games, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so I'm more familiar with Lua. Also, from my research on the topic, the Lua Just-in-Time Compiler, or LuaJIT, is one of the fastest scripting engines in existence, as far as I can tell. And it interfaces very nicely with C language, like with C code. So C and C++ both work really nicely with it. So I just kind of like everything there just kind of added up to me thinking, okay, well, C++ and Lua just kind of go together. So we'll just use Lua. And that way I don't need to try and use a language that I don't really understand. Yep. Yeah, see, my issue with C, because I do like C to an extent, but my issue with it is how weak the types are. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this real quick. My issues with C are how weak the typing is, right? It's static typing, but it's so weak that you might as well not even have types in some ways. Yeah, no, it's not a dumb question. It's a perfectly reasonable one, asking which, because different people like different scripting languages, right? The reason that I'm doing this for the most part anyway is because I like some of the features that Emacs has, but I hate Emacs Lisp with a passion. So I just kind of thought, I can probably write something, and I'm familiar with Lua. I am quite happy with it, and it's a very fast implementation of it. So I just figured that seems like the way that I want to go here. So no, not a dumb question. Just I had thought about it, and I'd looked into using Python, but I decided that Lua fit my needs better. Anyway, that was interrupting. Back to my this other question or comment, I guess. See, yeah, I like C, but there's the weak typing really is a turn off. I actually really love template programming. I love compile time programming. It's one of my favorite things that a lot of languages, a lot of older languages like C, just really don't do very well. And so, one of the features that really pisses me off that Zig has and most of the languages don't is compile time programming is very much first class. And I guess there are other languages that do that as well, but Zig really makes it clear this is what the language is for. But C++ is really kind of moving in the direction of compile time programming being a first class feature. Recently, with C++ 26, they are incorporating better compile time type reflection. So I'm getting pretty excited about that. So I'm going to test that out some, see if that works the way I want it to. And if it does, then I'm pretty much sold as far as C++ goes, because I can decide, which features I want and which features I don't want, right? I can say, hey, I'm not using your weird, your weird methods for this, that, and the other thing, but like the basis of the language is basically just C with very strong types, and I can get behind that. Like I can get behind namespaces, I can get behind strong typing, I can get behind modules. But I agree, like there's some parts of C++ that are just kind of weird and that I'm not especially fond of, but if I can just ignore those and use the parts that I like, then hey, I'm happy to do that. Okay. So let's see if I can get this. So I think maybe it's that it wants me to make the context. So let's go ahead and do that. Do glibw make context current. And that's there. If and let me just make sure that I'm not screwing that up. Okay, so there's no return value there, so I don't need to do an if statement. And then let's call GL clear here, because it's easy enough. Oops. There we go. All right. Let me the selector here. Things are going to be a little funky, just because. So right now, as you can, that covers everything up there. So, but yeah. So it is. That's a opened window, and it's just clearing it to a blank screen. And because I'm using Hyperland, my windows are tiling, so it basically covers up everything on the on my terminal. But that's fine. That's not an issue. I can deal with that. Okay, let's go ahead and close it, and it should just end the program, which it does. Nice. Okay. Yeah, and Python's a perfectly good language, but there are a number of features that Python has that are just really not necessary for what I want. Like, for example, I don't need a class system for what's just a scripting language. Most of the really intense stuff that I'm going to be doing, like intensive processing wise, and stuff that's going to need classes and persistent data storage and things like that, a lot of that is going to be done in C or C++, and then imported so that the scripting language can access it through the foreign function interface. So, like, I don't really need a lot of the like higher level features that Python comes with in order for this to all work. So, there's a lot of reasons why I didn't use Python, but Python's a perfectly good language, and there are a lot of programs that use it as their primary scripting language. I know Blender does. What's it called? There's a text editor called Sublime that I think uses Python for its scripting. Yeah, yeah. Just-in-time compiling is kind of a mind melter for me. I don't quite understand how it works, but it works. So I'm gonna use it. Anyway, okay. Let's see what time I got. 20 minutes left. Okay, so it looks like the module system is fine as far as like using it with other libraries, right? GLFW is an external library, so I think that'll all work fine. So in that case, I am going to. Do I need to? Oh. Okay, so let's test out the compile time reflection then, because that's another reason why I was kind of looking at this. So let's pull up some stuff on how to do that. I don't know if I'm really going to need this, but it's cool, and I kind of want to see how the support is for this part of the language, because this is very recent. Most compilers haven't actually implemented this yet, but it is on the C++ 26 version. Standard, I guess. So let's see. Let's see if we can get this working here. All right, examples. Here we go. Okay, selecting member. Yeah, great talking to you. Have a great day. All right, let's see. Second example, name is something by number for specific type. Okay. Okay, let's try that. So I'm just gonna go open up the renderer again. I don't really need to test anything. And let's see. Let's call it that. Also, back to your comment, Mr. Chelovek, or is that Chelovek? I'm not sure the pronunciation there, but one other thing that I like about C++ that is not a thing in C is the fact that in C, if I were doing this, I'd have to do something like this, and you know, I could probably get rid of this other thing there and do type destruct, which is I just don't like it. I don't like that it is basically always a thing. It's unnecessary. So, yeah, lots of different reasons why I find C++ easier to deal with. So, anyway, all right, let's back here. Okay, so let's do int I, j, and k. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make these. This is actually going to be a useful thing, which I'll talk about in a second. So let me do this. Just throw some array numbers on those. Okay. So there's a const eval auto number. I'm basically just copying stuff. There's a document that was released by ISO C++, right? The group that actually defined this stuff. And so curious what these are actually. Oh, gee. Cannot get the right thing there. Okay, I'll stick with that for the moment, and then let's see, do I need to export these? Or is that all being... I think those are all getting exported, so I think that's fine as is. Okay. Is this thing... Okay, why is that not... Oh, my goodness. Wait, why is that not displaying? That's oh, that's why. Hold on. Can I... Okay, we'll just get rid of this. Sorry about that. I didn't even realize that it was covering up basically my entire screen there. That's my bad. I could probably... I need to figure out a better way to handle that, because that's obviously a problem. So I'll fix that here in the future. What did I hit there? Okay. Anyway, all right. So those should all be exported. So just make sure all of this will work. Hold on. Let's go to main and test this out. I don't really need GLFW. Oh, I'll just leave it there. I'm not going to get rid of that yet. Okay. Make sure that these are all array initializations, because that is what it needs. Okay, so just going to test this real quick, see if this functions properly. If it does, then I'm going to be having a lot of fun with this, and I will explain why in just a moment. I think I have to also put that on. So it's equal to 2, and just copy this entire line real quick. Go like this, there. And we'll pick something outside of that, so we'll say 4, and yeah, that's fine. Screw with that. So this should release a compile time error. Let's see. Oh, right, that's not the name of the structure. That's why. Hold on. Down here. Right down here. Okay. It's going to be test. There we go. Okay. Go to main again. Make sure this is... Okay. Spaghetti primary expression before. Let's see. Does that not work on GCC? It might not. If it doesn't, then I might have to switch back to Clang. Hold on, let me check the support here. Let's see, C++ specification. Let's see if they got a nice list. Maybe here. Is there anywhere where it's got? No, okay, it does not. Okay, hang on. Jeez. Compiler conformance status. There we go. Let's see what we got here. Come on. If it doesn't, okay, I'll use this time to kind of explain where I'm kind of going with this. So when you're working with OpenGL, one of the things that you got to make sure is that the data that you are using for like saying, this is where I want you to draw this particular polygon, this particular triangle, I guess, and what colors for that for that triangle, maybe texture data, what have you. All that stuff needs to be laid out ahead of time. And the way that you typically do this is you just kind of rely on things being statically defined for you, or not for you, but like you just statically define things ahead of time. And then you go from there. It's like, okay, I know that the data is going to be laid out this way, so I'll just do that in the shader, and everything will match up. And if everything matches up the way that it's supposed to, then you're good to go, right? There's nothing wrong. There's nothing's going to go wrong. But that relies on you being consistent. And, it is a thing that you can fix. But like, for example, let's say you've got a bunch of different kind of sets of things that you want to render, and you want them to be defined differently. Like, maybe you want a different shader for your text data than you do for your buttons, right? Like the background of the button, something like that, maybe. Maybe you want to, instead of using actual like letters for your buttons, maybe you want to essentially copy those into a texture ahead of time, and then you basically just treat each button as its own texture. And so you're pretty much forced to go that route that I'm describing. And so, you're going to be defining a lot of different shaders with a lot of different ways to lay out the data. And so it would be nice to be able to go once and say, okay, I'm defining how a shader is constructed and how all the kind of background data that the program itself is going to figure out and then send to the shader. It'd be nice to be able to kind of have all of that happen in one place without me having to go and say, okay, I've got all these different types of data. Okay, I need to add in, what's it called? Vertex array data, I think is how it's typically talked about. Basically, vertex array stores how data is going to be stored in the vertex buffer, right? So like you've got a big buffer of data, and it's usually like, maybe you've got, I'll just open up the editor here and kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. Let's go down here, just put a comment. Okay, so, you've got your buffer here, and it's got, color data, and then position data, maybe 2 of those, we'll say. And then, maybe you've got something else like texture coordinates, so, texture data, and then it's going to go on, right? Maybe you interleave it, maybe that's what you want to do, or maybe you want to do it in blocks. But either way, you've got a layout for the data in your buffers. And that's, the OpenGL has to know what you're doing, right? It has to know how you want that data to be used. Otherwise, things are going to go wrong. And so the way you do that is through vertex array. Hang on, I'll look it up actually. Make sure I'm not. Hang on. Let's do OpenGL documentation. Make sure I'm actually getting this right, because otherwise, don't necessarily want to steer people wrong, and that's kind of rude. Come on. This will work. If you guys, any of you are watching, are curious about learning OpenGL, there's a really, really great set of tutorials called on this website called learnopengl.com. It's really pretty good. Okay, so let me just find what I'm looking for. Okay. Don't need to worry about the shader. Here we go. Vertex attribute or attrib array is how it's written up in the API. It's basically just saying, hey, this section of data is going to be for color data. This one's going to be for position, and this one's it's just describing what goes where. And so you have to do that. You have to go through and say, I want the data to be stored in this fashion. And that has to reflect how the data is stored itself. So you have to have something that will, or you don't have to, but it's nice if you can make it so that the system can just read through your code and see, oh, the vertex data is being handled in this fashion. Okay, I'm going to make sure to include this code here to call these attribute arrays with these values. I hope I explained that well. I probably screwed that up, but yeah, hold on. Let me just. Okay, I don't know why, but it's not going to the part of the site for the ISO Oh wait, that's going to CPP reference. I don't know why it's going there. I guess that's just where the ISO website is pointing to, which is kind of weird. I'm surprised they don't have that for themselves. Okay. Yeah, I'll probably, if I can actually get to the site here, then I'll be able to tell you guys exactly what GCC supports. But it seems as though it does not currently support this. What is EDG? Not sure what compiler that is. I'll have to take a look at that. Okay. Let's go ahead and save this. We're already reaching basically the end of the hour here, so I'll probably just call it a day. I'm really rather shocked by the number of views here. This is more views for a single stream than I've ever had, and way more engagement. So thank you all for that. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found this interesting. And I will probably be starting the new editor here, since I've got everything that I really cared about seems to work. So yeah, we'll go from there. I'll get started on the editor. Probably end up working on the logger, because thanks to not using the terminal for the actual editor itself, I'll be able to use the logger a little bit more effectively, not have to worry about things breaking down. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you again next time, and I hope you have a great day.